Okay, let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thanks for your word. Thank you for the opportunity that we have to gather together today. Pray you'll bless our time together. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, today, I'm going to call this Holy War. And that's play on words for obvious reasons. I've been doing this for a long time. By the way, if you want to go to our YouTube channel, I did do 4 interviews this week. Brian Schrager, Nicole Jan-Sajan, Danny Seaman, and Miri Eisen. So and they're all each about an hour long. But if you want to look at those, they're on our YouTube channel. And again, we'll just remind you to like and subscribe. And I won't even begin to scratch the surface this week as we talk about these things that are going on in the Middle East, the revolution in Syria. Israel appears to have neutralized Hezbollah. Turkey's rising this week. You're going to be, I think, shocked by some of the, well, you shouldn't be shocked if you've been listening to us for a while. Iran, Russia, a lot of the things that we talk about in End Times Bible Prophecy. So this week, if my little wheel of prophecy would be spinning like a top. And we have these passages that are prophetic passages, and you'll see these phrases used throughout these passages. This is sort of off the topic, but usually I quote from Daniel chapter 12. It says, Daniel, seal up the book until the time of the end. And then when you read that in conjunction with Daniel 11, the wise will understand and instruct many. The wise will understand, but the wicked will never understand. So as we get closer to these things being fulfilled in a broad sense, you're going to have understanding as to what's going on if you're paying attention. You have to be in the scripture, you have to be in the word. But then you need to look at other times where the time of the end is used in these prophetic scriptures. So like in Daniel chapter 8, it says, this prophecy is for the time of the end. Was that the same time of the end as was talked about when Daniel was told to seal the book up till the time of the end? I happen to think that they are. And so we see things, there's a tendency sometimes we want to, there's a default towards what I would call preterism, like the prophecy's been fulfilled, we don't need to worry about that anymore. So you'll see that with regard to some people, and these are friends of mine, they think that Isaiah 17's been fulfilled. I don't think it's been fulfilled, but I'm not sure. I think it's part of the Armageddon scenario because it talks about the Lord coming back and looking on the Lord. So that seems to be, that's the second coming. And it talks about a lot more destruction than just Damascus. But certainly you could see how Damascus could be destroyed very quickly with the speed at which it fell just in the last week. So we're going to see these things, and then, whenever I put up the slide, people say, "Oh, we're already at the fourth seal," and so we'll see. I mean, again, one of these things, prophecy is we're going to look back and say, "Oh, yeah, that was what was being talked about." So Daniel 8, you have Daniel 7, all these things I think are in play. So let's look at some of the things that went on this week. And I'll try to make sense of them, because part of what I'm going to talk about in the broad general sense is turmoil, just turmoil everywhere in almost every facet of life. Economy, politics, geopolitics, that type of thing. So, and I'll say this, I don't know that this is related to Bible prophecy, but I think it's indicative of a attempt to control what people say and think. And part of this was lawfare. So there was a case brought against Trump down in Georgia for trying to interfere with the 2020 election. This week, the Court of Appeals down in Georgia removed the prosecutor from the case, said that she shouldn't have been able to bring the indictment. She's engaged in a conflict of interest, improper conduct, so she's out. So now the question is, now they refuse to dismiss the case, but they dismissed the prosecutor who had worked on this case for years, and she can't have anything to do with it, and it probably taints her deputy. So what they're going to have to do, if they're going to do it, continue the case, they're going to have to go through a panel in Georgia and appoint a special prosecutor, and I'm not sure that they're going to do that. This was a big deal. This was a lawfare case brought against now President-elect Trump and a bunch of people, including his attorneys, that mounted challenges to the 2020 election. Some of them, by the way, have pled guilty to the charges in this case, and I don't think those will be overturned. But that's something we're going to have to wait and see on. So this is a big article in the Wall Street Journal the other day. And you're going to see a lot of these stories coming out over the last weeks of the Biden administration, because they're going to be, people are going to try to well, I didn't participate. I didn't have anything to do with that. You're going to see a lot of things like, oh yeah, everybody knew that Biden was incompetent and everybody propped him up. And then the question was, who was making all the decisions? Who was signing all the orders? And as he's threatening to do these blanket pardons, some people want to say, is he competent to do the pardons? And that's going to lead to a lot of litigation. The presidential pardon power is pretty broad and pretty absolute. I don't know that, I know everybody wants to do investigations of the people who are involved in a lot of this stuff, and maybe they'll work, maybe they won't. They may be given some kind of grant of immunity by the Supreme Court, by the U.S. courts, as opposed to just a blanket pardon immunity. So just pay attention to that space, because we've got so what's today, 22nd? We got 29 days until Trump is sworn in, a little over 4 weeks. I think you're going to see a lot of things happening over the next 4 weeks. I don't know exactly what. I really don't have much. I might have a reference to drones. I haven't even talked about that. I don't even know what to make of that myself. I watch YouTube channels and that type of thing to see what people are talking about, because part of it's a check on what I talk about, make sure I'm not out there on the crazy fringe. And on the drones thing, people are all over the place. It's aliens, it's not aliens, it's China, it's Iran, everybody's got a theory about it. And it's amazing to me, as someone who's talked on these subjects for a long, long time now, well over a quarter of a century, it's amazing to me that suddenly there are about 1 million geopolitical experts out there. And the interesting thing is nobody agrees with anybody. So it's just the way things are in the prophecy community right now. It's a very confusing time. There's a lot of things on the ground. And so here's the headline: White House made adjustments for an aging, diminished Biden. But what were they all saying? He's fine. He's not diminished. He's fully in charge of his faculties. I think I saw a clip of Joe Scarborough from about a year ago saying, he's better than he's ever been. He's more competent and engaged and everything. How's that working out, Joe? Scarborough. So this is Daniel Greenfield. I would recommend that you follow him on X. Sultan Kanish, I love he's Jewish. Sultan Kanish, I think this is just like one of the greatest Twitter handles of all time. He writes at Front Page Magazine, but here's what he said in this tweet the other day: the cover-up of Biden's condition matters less than the question of who was running America. Cabinet members did meet with Biden. Policy was set by a close circle of aides. Cabinet members talked to aides who then got back to them. Weekend at Bernie style, Biden's orders were relayed by insiders who wouldn't let anyone else talk to him These people need to be scrutinized and forced to testify. And I agree with that. I would be issuing subpoenas and that type of thing, because the people that are in charge that have been doing this are not always competent. I'm going to play a clip from 2020. This is Brian, the guy who had some issues with integrity and that type of thing at NBC News. This is MSNBC in 2020. What's his name? Brian Williams, yeah. And even though he had those problems, he got the show on MSNBC so they could continue paying him a lot. So these are people that get paid a lot of money. And this is a commentator. She eventually left MSNBC because they weren't left-wing enough. But I want you to listen. They're talking about the 2020 election. They're talking about Bloomberg, who was going to spend $500 million to run for president back in 2020. So listen to this. This is kind of an interesting thing, and then we'll do the math they talked about once they're done.
But you see it as a possibility if he wants to spend $1 billion beating this guy, he could do it.
Absolutely. Somebody tweeted recently that actually with the money he spent, he could have given every American $1 million.
I've got it. Let's put it up on the screen. When I read it tonight on social media, it kind of all became clear. Bloomberg spent $500 million on ads. U.S. population 327 million. Don't tell us if you're ahead of us on the math. He could have given each American $1 million and have had lunch money left over. It's an incredible way of putting it.
It's an incredible way of putting it. It's true. It's disturbing. It does suggest, what we're talking about here, which is there's too much money in politics.
Okay, so there's 327 million people back in 2020, and Bloomberg spends $500 million, and they say he could have given $1 million to each and every American. Now, so like second grade math would not let that go by. And then Brian Williams goes, I read the same tweet. It's amazing. So let's do the math. So you do $500 million. Well, you would do $1 million. You would do $327 million is what you would give but you would have to give 327. Anyway, the number is way, way in the quadrillions of dollars, which is more than Bloomberg has. And these people have high-paying jobs, which is just absolutely amazing. So I guess you would take 327 million times $1 million. So whatever, add 9 zeros to 327 million. Well, I don't even know what that number is. I know it's way more than quadrillions. So here is the America's farm recession is here. One early response is sending billions to farmers. And they talked in the article, this is the Wall Street Journal yesterday, about farmers are having big trouble. The economy is down, farm prices are down. So you can see the futures prices for commodities have really dropped. They're way down. That's not good for farmers. Farmers have to borrow money, and a lot of them are saying we can't afford to plant anymore. Well, farmers aren't planting. That sort of causes problems with a lack of food, supply and demand, prices of food go up. And I didn't buy eggs this week. Did anybody buy eggs? I guess they went up to in some places they were like $10 a dozen, like out in California. So this is based on, the next slide, this is based on a little blurb at The Economist. So when they do that cover that I've talked about a little bit, The World in 2025, it says, global warming is speeding up, another reason to think about geoengineering. So The Economist goes, well, we just need to put a whole bunch of stuff into the atmosphere and we can cool down the Earth. But then I showed you that chart at the Washington Post, was based on a research article that said the Earth is really about as cool as it's ever been. There's been a little bit of spike in the last couple hundred years, but not much. It's statistically insignificant compared to the whole of Earth history. AI continues to grow. By the way, we're going to do another prophecy roundtable. I'll start posting on social media this week about that with Patrick Wood, Britt Gillette, Scott Townsend, Tom Hughes, and myself. That's going to be on Wednesday night, January 8th at 7 p.m. I think that's the 8th, 7 p.m. Eastern. So you might want to block that out. It'll probably go 2.5 hours. So here's the next thing, the next leap in AI. It says the next great leap in AI is behind schedule and crazy expensive. And they go into some detail in this article. And they talk about the number of parameters and everything like ChatGPT 4. They started out at 117 million. Now they're up to 1.7 trillion bits or bytes of information that they look at to generate these things. And I don't know if any of you played around with it. I've played around with it a little bit. They did a very good study at the New York. I don't even have time to talk about a lot of this stuff. They did a great study at the New York Times. And what they did was they went through like images, like a group of images, like it looked like the UN, all the kinds of different ethnic and races and that type of thing. And they ran it through AI, where AI learned on the prior images for like 20 generations. And what did they find out? Everybody looked the same almost at the end of running that through AI 20 times. Which everybody says, well, maybe they're not doing that good. Now, I think the AI, as we always say, it's artificial intelligence, it's not real wisdom. So you need to be very careful with it, but it does do some amazing things. And is surprisingly accurate in a lot of cases, but my bigger point is tech intrusion. So this week, this is Google launches most capable Gemini 2.0 generative AI model. This is another leap forward by many times of computing power and that sort of thing. They're getting to where there's going to be tech intrusion like you would not believe. It's very concerning. Now, the people at World Economic Forum, the FII Institute in Saudi Arabia, the World Government Summit, and now recently, about 2 weeks ago, they had a thing called the Doha Forum. I think it was about 2 weeks ago, Monday. Tomorrow, it'll be 2 weeks ago tomorrow. And so they had the guy, you're going to see they're talking about algorithms. Now, algorithms are very powerful. Yuval Harari has talked about, the one who controls the algorithms will control the world. And if you get the right algorithm, you can become a very, very wealthy person. So here's the Doha Forum, and I can't remember this guy's name. He's the assistant to Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, which, by the way, is going to be based on AI next month or early February when it happens in Switzerland. So here is the discussion at the Doha Forum about algorithms.
I think you were touching on all the important points in your introduction. Both the G2, China and the US, 50% of the global economy, knows that the nation that comes out of this century on top of the new technology will also be the most powerful nation. These are superpowers without superpowers. And I know that the future superpower is Gen AI. And Gen AI, as you alluded to, can be a force for good. It can increase productivity with 10% in the coming decade. That's a lot of prosperity. But I think it's a good idea that the humans are on top of the algorithms and not the algorithms on top of the humans. And what we hope for is that both Beijing and DC will agree on that and at least can create some guardrails and some traffic rules that can make sure that algorithms don't come out of control.
Okay, and you remember at the World Government Summit over 2 years ago, Pippa Malmgren said, hey, we need a digital Bill of Rights. And how many of you have gotten your copy of the digital Bill of Rights? Is it buried in your terms of service that you agree to all the time, that are always changing and being updated and probably getting more and more intrusive? And the answer is no. So but they're talking about like, well, we'll put in guardrails. Well, dude, it's been like 2 years we've been talking about this artificial ChatGPT and artificial intelligence and generative AI. and nobody's done anything. And in some places like OpenAI, they fired their safety team, got rid of every single one of them. That's not concerning. Well, here's the Riyadh. They had a big summit in Riyadh recently, Internet Governance Forum in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And the interesting thing is you'll see a lot of these rich oil-rich Gulf countries will be involved in a lot of this technology. Some of my friends are suggesting that some of the 10 beasts, 10 kingdoms that form this final beast empire might be tech companies. I mean, they're incredibly wealthy. The growth in their wealth, I mean, I don't know his stock portfolio, but they said Elon Musk's wealth has doubled since the election. He's now worth over $500 billion, $500 billion. And he always wears a t-shirt. I kind of admire that. But here's the Riyadh Declaration. I'm going to read it for you. They talked about AI and digital identity, digital IDs, and this is what they had to say. Let me go in here. Well, I'll read it from here. In conclusion, we recognize the transformative potential of artificial intelligence, secure digital identities, and online digital safety in building a world that is equitable and accessible to all. By harnessing AI's capabilities, fostering globally recognized digital ID systems, and strengthening digital safety frameworks and initiatives, we aim to empower marginalized communities, enhance international cooperation, and address the pressing challenges of our time. And somebody should send that through AI and say, what do they mean when they're saying it's a word salad? Therefore, we recognize that our principles mark a pivotal step toward benefiting from the transformative potential of artificial intelligence and building a more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable digital future. At the same time, we emphasize the importance of fostering the development of a standardized, secure digital ID systems that empower individuals and enable businesses to operate across borders with ease. Finally, we emphasize the importance of promoting international cooperation to ensure digital safety. Yeah, right. So this week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, about Google came out and said they had made a big leap in quantum computing. Now, I don't profess to understand quantum computing. Quantum physics and that type of thing is a little complicated. The saying I always heard is that quantum physics are only understood by PhD physics people and 2-year-olds who can kind of grasp things just appearing, But so Google announced Willow. This is a chip quantum system that they've developed. So here's this is going to be kind of geeky, but listen towards the end, it'll get a little bit understanding. They've developed a leap in quantum processing power. One of the problems in quantum computing has been that you get a lot of errors, and they're correcting those now. And they've increased the speed and accuracy at which these things can be computed. Now, there's still a little bit of ways from having a quantum computer in your pocket, but understand if this happens, nothing is secure. Everything can be broken. And that's concerning, especially when there's push to go to crypto and all this other stuff. So here's the guy from Google talking about Willow.
Our logical qubits now operate below the critical quantum error correction threshold, a long sought after goal for the quantum computing field since the theory was discovered in the 90s. And we've achieved it for the first time with Willow. Errors are exponentially suppressed in our logical qubits, as error rates are halved each time we add physical qubits and scale from distance 3 to 5 to 7 surface codes. We've pitted Willow against one of the world's most powerful supercomputers with the random circuit sampling benchmark. The results are pretty surprising. By our best estimates, a calculation that takes Willow under 5 minutes would take the fastest supercomputer 10 to the 25 years. That's a 1 with 25 zeros following it, or a timescale way longer than the age of the universe. This result highlights the exponentially growing gap between classical and quantum computation for certain applications.
So there you go. So their computer did it in less than 5 minutes. A supercomputer, not a regular computer, a supercomputer would have taken 10 to the 25th power years, which is a long time, in 5 minutes. The chip called Willow represents a significant advance in solving error correction problems that have long dogged quantum computing efforts, the company said in a blog post. Google also said the chip performed a computation in under 5 minutes that would have taken current supercomputers a near eternity to do, longer than the universe has existed, under anybody's timescale. Quantum computing holds promise for a wide range of applications, from discovering new drugs to security and encryption. Still an emerging field, quantum computing harnesses abilities of quantum mechanics to solve problems beyond the capability of traditional computers. So it's a huge breakthrough, and I'm sure we'll talk about that at our next thing. Okay, so let's go to the Middle East. We're going to talk about this for most of the rest of the time, and I'm sure I preached first hour. I talked about Christ at the checkpoint some, and what I consider to be just the horrific Marxist liberation theology that drives that. So we're about 2 weeks since the fall of Assad. And everybody's an expert on it. It was a stunning thing. As you can see from the Washington Post thing, it went down in like 9 days from when it really started. The people that did this had to be prepared. They had to know what they were doing. They had to be funded. And so there's a lot of questions about who's funding them. But we're also seeing a lot of things. And it's shaken up geopolitics on an epic scale. Russia withdrew from Syria. Iran has withdrawn from Syria. Hezbollah now has no supply line. And this morning I saw that Syria, the new rebels in charge, will not let any Iranian plane into Syrian airspace. Israel took advantage of the situation. They figured that, listen, these guys that are taking over Syria, it's a choice between evil and evil. We don't trust them. We managed Assad, but now these guys, they're crazy. I mean, there's a lot of really disturbing images and things of street executions, enacting Sharia law and that type of thing. I don't trust any of them. And so Israel said, listen, Assad had a lot of weapons. He had a lot of air defense systems. He had missiles. He had airplanes. He had naval boats. And Israel went in and destroyed all of them. And it would easily cost $20 or $30 billion to replace what they've destroyed in the last 2 weeks. They just said, we're not going to let those rebels, we're not attacking the rebels, but we're not going to give them the leftovers. Now, how would Israel have learned to do that? Well, maybe Israel watched what happened when the United States withdrew from Afghanistan and left everything behind. What, $80 billion worth of weapons? And by the way, where are all those weapons today? And did any of those weapons make their way to the Al-Qaeda affiliated rebel groups in Syria to allow them to take over Syria in 9 days, 8 or 9 days? I don't know. I don't know. I'm just saying things have a way of disappearing from one place and appearing another. And when people are motivated, they're going to do that. So this is from the New York Times today. desperation and betrayal in the final days of the Assad dynasty. This al-Jilani, appears to be, he might be Saudi-born. He is lived in the Golan Heights. He took his name as